In what seems like a recurring video, we are back now yet again after a week of Mythic Plus testing, and this time we're going to talk about my thoughts on the actual tank changes. So if you've seen, I made a video on like reading the post like we always do. This is not the third time we've done this, because the other times were about posts on affixes, and then we come into the game and try them out, and then I give you my thoughts on them. And this time it's about the tank changes, mostly. We'll also talk about the affixes and the dungeon stuff, but yeah, the tank changes, specifically Blood DK. If you watched the video, you know I was very sour on it, and a lot of questions in that live stream are something that I'm going to have trouble summarizing, frankly. So the live stream was like, yeah, it was almost like 4 hours, I think. So it's hard to watch, but honestly, I think you should give it a shot if you want to see it in real time. What I'm going to talk about and show here, it cannot elucidate it. You need to see it. You need to understand what's happening when I talk about these things. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about them like you already know what you're seeing, but you may not. So anyway, what I'm trying to get at here is the changes are substantial. A lot of people are out there saying, basically like there's a lot of weird conversation between people saying it's really, really, really bad. Like I'm going to quit the game over it. And then other people who are saying it doesn't matter at all. It's totally inconsequential. I don't even notice it. I think the reality is everybody who read the post is thinking it's going to be super bad, and everybody who's played the game after reading the post thinks it's not bad at all. And I think this is a trap, like a logic trap that you've fallen into if you are one of the people who are saying this, because you read the post and you thought it was going to be really bad, and now you're comparing it to what your expectations were when you played the game, and you're like, oh, this isn't even that bad. But in reality, if you start looking at some actual numbers and the situations that are occurring in the dungeons, you realize this is very bad. And it's not very bad in the way that the class is now unplayable and you're never going to succeed and you should quit and you should stop playing tanks, or all these people are saying these things. It's really bad in the fact that Blizzard has effectively failed to do exactly what they said they were going to do by like a million miles. Like they didn't even come close. Not even close, from what I could tell. Okay. Now get it. I only did 3 hours of dungeons or whatever it was. I'm not an expert on this topic, but honestly, I don't know how many people out there have more experience, and Blizzard is making themselves a fool by saying this. Give us feedback. So my biggest feedback is fix the fucking dungeons. Like you made this situation here impossible because you're putting the crazy changes to tanks out after you already made crazy changes to Mythic Plus that make them way, way, way harder than they've ever been before, on top of dungeons that are very poorly tuned with very difficult mechanics and that are frankly not very balanced against each other, and you're asking for feedback on how difficult it is to tank. Well, guess what, bro? It was hard to tank before the changes, okay? So I can't give you feedback because you've put us in a situation where we can't figure out if the difficulty of the survival is because of the content being overtuned, the scaling on our characters, the difficulty of the mechanics, or the tank changes you made. But I'm still going to give you my best shot. And I think the clearest way of showing you guys this, first of all, we're going to look at all of these stats, but this is how we're going to start. Take a look at this stuff here. We used to do this all the time, okay? We're going to start by looking at well, first of all, yeah, it needs to be on overall. We're going to look at healing done, okay? Here's the healing done chart. I still blew the shaman healer out of the water. I'm going to tell you right now, these guys who have boxes in their name, they're Chinese players, they had 15s done on the beta. These are some of the best players I've ever played with, and they were in a beta dungeon, okay? So they're very good players. I have no idea what's going on that people are doing 15s, but regardless, these are real players. This is a very, very good group. And there was some DCs that ultimately stopped us from finishing the last boss. We weren't going to upgrade the key, so I guess people still care about that and they leave. But anyway, I'm telling you that this shaman knew what he was doing. He used the CDs exceptionally well, and this is what the chart looks like. So everybody who commented, wow, did you embarrass yourself, by the way, the people who did this. I'm really glad that they're nerfing tanks so they can't solo bosses anymore. Or I'm really glad they're nerfing tanks so they're not out healing me anymore. Yeah, that didn't happen. And that's not even the worst, like the most aggressive way that Blizzard failed to meet what they said they were going to do on paper. So we'll keep going. But anyway, let's talk about this because this is more important. So here's what the healing chart looks like, by the way. Right out of the gate, you're going to see Blood Shield obliterated. Like obliterated. Compare this to Live WoW, obliterated. It would be like, it would probably be double on Live WoW, okay? It would definitely be above Death Strike. Probably be 800 million on Live WoW. So this is a massive nerf to Blood Shield. Everything I said in the video that I made prior about this is still the exact way I feel about it. So if you haven't seen it, like TLDR, the changes they're making are way bigger than they think they are. And it's going to make, you know, this kind of preemptive mode where you're in Mythic Plus, where you're not really taking a lot of damage, but then suddenly you're in danger. It's going to make it a lot harder to survive, which would be the biggest opposite of how to get the tank to be less squishy, right? And less one-shottable. So they did a terrible job there. We'll come back to that. So Blood Shield's now nerfed. People are saying like Mastery's going to be awful. I have no idea, honestly. They also nerfed Blood Plague, so Umbilicus gets nerfed. They basically nerfed everything we do. Everything we do across the board, we get nerfed. These are still the results. Look at the charts, right? Like, I mean, what is the problem? It's not a big change when you compare it to any change ever, but it is a big change when you compare it to what we had last build. Because now we're substantially weaker, substantially less likely to be able to sustain ourselves entirely without the healer's help. But they did not get what they said they were supposed to get done. They did not make us passively better. They did not eliminate us getting one shot, like at all. Like it's still super spiky. I don't even notice the difference. It feels like the exact same. Yet they made that an obvious like goal. So what are they talking about? It didn't happen. So when you hear this, what are your first thoughts? Like right now, just think of something in your head, right? What are your first thoughts? I bet a lot of you are probably thinking Blizzard sucks at making the game or that they're incompetent, right? But my first thoughts are they're not done. That this, if this is a goal of theirs, they failed, and that's bad because now they're going to do it even worse. They're going to make it even more the case, okay? So if you read those comments from Blizzard and thought, oh, this is bad, this is a big nerf, and then you come in the game and you're like, they really didn't nerf us that bad. And then you also realize like, oh, they didn't accomplish their goals at all either. Like the goals are just like completely, like they didn't even come close. What does that mean? You think they're just going to stop? They're just going to give up? I mean, I don't. I think there's a lot of people out there who think they will, and maybe they will. But anyway, that's my point on that. But yeah, in terms of overall healing, this is how we got on this point. Here's what the healing looks like, okay? Here's what the healing of the healer looks like, okay? So you see, I wasn't even his top healing. Now that's abnormal. Every other dungeon we did, I was their top healing, and some of them by a lot. We did one before with a monk, and I was 40% of his overall healing. That guy was very good too, I felt like. So it's a little bit inconsistent. Hard to tell what's actually happening here. This is the truest test of it. This is what we used to do all the time, as far back as Legion. People always used to say, you know, a warrior is a better tank than a Blood DK. This was back in Legion. Because they can reduce more damage than a Blood DK can take. And I said, but you haven't really looked at it. And Blood DK gives you the option to look at it. Because Prot Warrior, you can't fully tell how much you're actually reducing. It's very, very, very difficult to do, in especially real time. Blood DK gives you that opportunity, because this is how you do it. You look at the overall healing done. So I did 1.96 billion healing over the course of that whole dungeon. Then you look at the damage taken. So I took 2.23 billion. So I already did the math on this. That is 88% of the damage I took, I healed. Now, if you've never seen this number before, you're like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. How overpowered is this? It's not. For every other time I've ever looked at this, from Legion through Shadowlands, and I kind of stopped doing it a lot in Dragonflight because it just kind of got wary. I just kind of got bored of it. Every other time I looked at it, it was 95 or higher. 96 was common, 97, sometimes we saw some 98s. Now, the reason we never saw 100 was because the healer would accidentally heal you all the time. So if we take overhealing into account, I do think it would be 100% in almost every situation. Like, can I survive everything on my own? Yes. Do I need to? No. So that's why it would never be 100. Now, the fact that it's 88 or whatever it was, that's bad. That's a huge drop. That's potentially a 10% differential on that. It's probably more like a 7% differential on average, maybe a 6% differential on average. That's a big nerf because that's all we have. Do you understand that? Now, it's also tempered by the fact that we have more survivability passively. But like I said, they did not hit the mark on this. Not even close. I'm still as squishy as ever. I feel like I could be one shot, especially on the pull, constantly. But there's a caveat here. They changed the class, like actual crazy class changes that people may not be aware of. So before, the way it worked was Bone Storm. They changed Bone Storm. If you're not aware, massively changed Bone Storm from live WoW. It now consumes a Bone Shield instead of Runic Power. And you would think for 6 months now, or 6 weeks now, Bone Storm's consumption of Runic Power, or of Bone Shield, would remove the duration, like other things for Insatiable Blade, right? Of Dancing Rune Weapon. It didn't work like that for 6 weeks. It fucking works like that now. I don't know how long it's worked like that, because last week I was on vacation, but I'm pretty sure it's this build that they changed it. So on top of all the nerfs, they buffed the hell out of the spec, because now this spell is absolutely going to be mandatory, and you're now going to have basically a 20-second Dancing Rune Weapon CD. If you do it well, it's like a 25-second Dancing Rune Weapon CD. That's if both this and Tombstone are up. I don't think there's any other ways to game it, but if both are up and you use them perfectly, it looks like it's about a 25-second CD. Now the problem is that's now such a short CD that those spells are not back, so it's a 1-minute CD. So by the time the next Dancing Rune Weapon's back, you would be wasting it if you use them back to back. So it's a bit of a clever change, really. It's more clever than I thought it was going to be. It's not as big of a buff as you think, but it does mean that in any difficult pack where all 3 things are up when you pull that pack, you will have basically 50%, maybe like more like 70% Dancing Rune Weapon uptime, depending on the length of the pack. This again is tempered by the fact that they nerfed Everlasting Bond, and they nerfed Dancing Rune Weapons, Parry, and all these other things we talked about. So it's still a net buff, but it's not related to the changes they made. So I'm not going to calculate that in when I'm commenting on these things. But it is important to understand, because now we have higher Dancing Rune Weapon uptime, we have better passive armor, and I also switched my weapon enchant from Fallen Crusader to Stoneskin Gargoyle. It's a very controversial thing to do. For some reason, people really obsess over these types of things on the spec. I've always had an admiration for Stoneskin Gargoyle. If you don't know what it does, you honestly may not, if you've never played Blood DK in an era where I guess I'm not allowed to look at it for some reason. Something's wrong with the UI. All right, well, anyway, the TLDR of it is it increases all your stats, primary stats, by 6%. So that's strength, which is good, not better than Fallen Crusader over the course of the dungeon, even though they nerfed Fallen Crusader. It's still, I think it's like a 9% on average over the course of the dungeon strength proc, which is good because you get extra strength from Bone Shield, right? Now that they buffed that. But trading that 9%, on top of that, Fallen Crusader also heals you a little bit, but I think that heal is almost entirely circumstantial. Like, it never helps you survive, almost ever. On top of that, you also, from Gargoyle, the Gargoyle one, you also gain 6% stamina, okay? Which is a lot now, considering we're talking about a 50% cap on our health pool for the mastery, and it doesn't scale with Vamp Blood, right? So, like, those things are something to now reconsider. And on top of that, you also get armor passively from Stoneskin Gargoyle. So to me, I feel like I did gain a lot of passive mitigation. It just did such a little impact on the like, if you look at the gameplay, you can't tell that I gained it. So to me, that they failed, right? Like, I mean, I changed a bunch of stuff. They buffed the class basically with Bone Shield or Bone Storm impacting this. It should be a net gain physically, defensively, right? No, not even. It's not. You don't notice it. There's maybe a couple times where I'm like, I'm really surprised I didn't die there, but I honestly think that's more about the Fallen Crusader to Stoneskin Gargoyle change than it is about anything else. Because the passive health, just gaining that, it's like, okay, well, I didn't get one shot there now, you know? So anyway, it's really hard to decipher exactly. They also nerfed a bunch of the damage components. This is the overall. So now, if you watched the last time I looked at this, Blood Plague was like probably again almost double. It's probably like almost 200 million in this case, and now it's 90. So it's got nerfed substantially. But I also don't have consumption anymore. So here's the talents I'm taking now. I already kind of showed them, but I'm not taking consumption now. I'm just taking Bone Storm instead. That's really the only change we made. Another thing they talked about doing was less runic power. That may affect some people. It does not affect me. I am somebody who oftentimes sits on globals and runic power in general to make sure I can death strike when I need to. I love playing the spec this way. This was a hot topic again in Shadowlands because that wasn't how you're supposed to play the spec because of the parry and everything with Dancing Rune Open and the set bonus. I would still play this way. I do not like just throwing globals out and then getting caught in the globals. That's how you die, especially when you're reading chat as Split DK. So I don't really end up feeling like I'm ever lost for runic power. If anything, I'd be lost for globals now. So that might make haste better than mastery. We talked a lot about that. I do think mastery is obviously plummeting in value, but it's probably still the second best defensive stat. I don't know. Versatility is even better now because of the changes to Death Strike and everything about it. So yeah, I'd still go versatility over everything, but I think haste is probably a much better defensive stat now comparatively. But yeah, I don't know. That's pretty much everything I got to say about Blood DK. So the TLDR, people constantly ask me this. Every 5 minutes somebody asks this question. Do you feel the buff, the nerf? Yes, obviously. So I'm talking about an 87% healing over the course of the dungeon versus the damage taken, where it was 95 to 90 to almost 100. The lower that goes, the more you feel it, right? There was one dungeon we did where it was only 76%. And the lower you go, the more likely the healer can snipe you. You know what I mean? So do I feel it? Yes, obviously I feel it. I play Blood DK all the time. I have these patterns ingrained in my memory. I understand what it feels like to be unkillable versus what it feels like to struggle. But will it matter? No, absolutely. It's not going to matter at all. It plays the exact same way. They didn't shore up the one-shots. They didn't change what they said they were going to change. So why do it? I don't understand what the purpose of doing it. And all I can think is the dungeons are so freaking hard that they're like, when you putt in golf, they call it putting it through the break, where you hit the ball too hard that the ball just doesn't move at all because you hit it so hard it just goes right past the curve. That's what they did here. They added break to the putt, and the dungeons are so hard you blasted it through the break 10 feet past the hole. The dungeons are so hard, none of this matters. It's so difficult. The affixes are ridiculous. I'm telling you right now, this new affix they got on here is absolutely horrendous. While it's up, it is stacking a damage done debuff on every enemy in combat. Guess what? Even enemies not in combat, it aggroes them if they're close enough. Love that. What a great affix. Then you have to kill it. So you have to switch, target it. It's not like explosive. You can AoE it, it looks like. I'm pretty sure you can. But it has to be killed very quickly, so you're going to have to target it. And then as soon as it's gone, the debuff is removed from the mobs, thankfully, and you gain a whopping 20% crit to make up for that potentially 100% damage buff the mobs have while they're, being channeled on. Now, that's only if you fail, basically, but that happened multiple times because multiple people were dead. If even one person dies, or even like a few people don't target it, it's going to be like a 50% damage increase during it. It's awful. And again, just like the previous affix, it can spawn anywhere. Well, it's supposed to spawn in a location that's near where you're standing, from what I could tell. But it can spawn pretty much anywhere. And you could move away from it, just like we had the same problem in Grim Batol again. With the previous affix, it's going to happen again. If you ever have to move while it spawns, you're totally screwed. And unlike the last one where one person could handle it, that's not an option this time. You need everybody to switch to it ASAP. And again, what may not be obvious is like the first boss in Stone Vault, where he hits you for like 90% of your health when he hits you. If that guy is there channeling on the boss, it's like a 20 to 30% absolutely. You're definitely getting to that value no matter what, no matter how fast you kill it. That's a 20% damage buff during a mechanic that nearly one-shots you. You're going to die to it. There's going to be tons of times where you just get killed by this affix. What affix is harder than this, man? Tell me a fix from Dragonflight that's harder than these affixes. You guys asked for these affixes to be removed, and they added harder affixes. Affixes that actually matter on bosses, which no affix currently in Dragonflight does, other than dispelling something, right? This is far, far, far harder, and this is way harder than any tank changes they can make. So frankly, if you're out there talking about tank changes at this point, don't worry. Especially there's a lot of people who come in, and even on the video, they're like, I'm a 2.5K player. That means they're basically struggling to get 10s done. Blah, blah, blah. What is this going to matter? It's not going to matter at all. Okay? The content's not difficult enough for it to matter. Even though the content's relatively way more difficult than Season 4 of Dragonflight, it's still irrelevant. Like, you're doing content that's not even giving you the full gear cap. Don't worry about this shit. You'll be all right. Don't worry about it. But if you're doing the hardest content possible, you're probably going to notice it. Like, the gap from the beginning is like this. And then the larger you go, it's like a cone, right? Like, it gets wider the larger you go. So if you're doing a 10, you barely notice it. It's like a millimeter thick. But then if you're doing a 20, it's like 100. It's like a kilometer thick. You know what I mean? And it just keeps probably going up. I don't know how hard you can get at this point in the season, but yeah. And think about what we just talked about in the last time. The jump from 12 to 13 to 14 is going to be astronomical now. It's going to just destroy players. They're going to be in this infinite feedback loop where they may potentially double upgrade a 12 and then just have no shot of even finishing a 14, do the 13, get owned by it, back to a 12, double upgrade it, because it's like, it's going to be a mess. Hardest season ever, without question, coming up, especially if you play Blood DK. These nerfs are substantial. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. They obviously are having a big impact on the way the specs played, but they just failed to do all the things they said they wanted to do. It is not causing healers, like the healers are not going to be able to impact our health pool. I said this in the last video, bro. I have 10 million health. Like, what do you, look at the overall healing done, dude. He did 628k HPS. He can't heal me. Like, what's he gonna do? He can't, there's nothing he can do. Like, it's just not gonna happen. You know what I mean? There's no way that this guy's gonna be able to heal me for a substantial amount of health when I need it. My Death Strike will always heal for more than that. So, like, best case scenario here is they're talking about non-blood DKs when they make these statements. I knew this was gonna happen. And then the same thing about, you know, not getting one shot and being smoother. They said, like, you know, you'll take more damage, but you shouldn't die more. What are you talking about? Like, that didn't happen at all. We just got nerfed. That's it. Flat nerf. Nothing better. Like, again, they made changes, coincidentally, not related to these things. The Bone Storm change and some other stuff that happens effectively can be looked at as a buff, even though all the spells affected did get nerfed. It's still probably a buff. That's not related to these changes. They didn't make that to compensate for it. They didn't even talk about it. It wasn't even posted. So it's just a nerf. We just got nerfed. Who likes getting nerfed? Nobody. I get it. Who quits the game over a nerf? Nope. Come on. Don't be that guy. It's not a thing. You should not be. I mean, at worst, you just go play Frost. Like, go. It's not that big of a deal. This is not a big deal. Everybody's overreacting to it. You know, myself included at one point. Try it out in the beta. Tell me how you feel. I think you'll be surprised at how different the expectations you had versus the reality are. And I think that's now, everybody's reacting to that now that a few days have gone by. And they're like, oh, it didn't change anything. It's like, no, hold on a second. Don't say that. Because you know that difference, right? That 6% differential between the damage taken versus healing. Do you know where that's come from? It's not Death Strike. It's Blood Shield. That's the big difference. Blood Shield is now pretty much obliterated to the point where you're going to have way less physical mitigation. Despite the fact that they said they wanted to increase the armor to make up for that, it's just not going to work that way. I'm telling you, the Blood Shield change is the biggest change. People ask me all the time, do you think they'll like go back on the change? I think yes, considering the fact that they're basically just like knee-jerking at this point, especially this late in the expansion. What will I expect them to go back on? I think the logical choice for them to go back on is the stupid can't Death Strike more than once for one damage source. Like, it literally worked that way since the game launched. Wrath came out with that. And now they're getting rid of it, and they're acting like, oh, this is unfair. It's like, bro, well, why the hell was it in the game for 15 years? Like, can you explain that to me? If you think it's unfair now, what changed? It doesn't make any sense. It's a stupid idea, and it's way overcomplicated now. Like, if you look how they handle it in game, it's like, what is this? This is so stupid. The stupid buff that you can't even, like, track in real time because your buffs are flipping all around, so you can't even look at it. You need, like, 2 weak auras to manage it. You'll never be able to look at it. It's pointless, is what I'm saying. So they do that. They make it more complicated. It's a stupid change. They should undo that, okay? That's probably what they would do, but that's not what they should do. What they should do is undo all the things that impact the Blood Shield change. That is a far larger change, and it's going to punish mediocre players like myself, players who are not playing at the bleeding edge and relying on decent Death Strike usage, not perfect Death Strike usage, to survive in moments where we're not necessarily in great danger, but then all of a sudden we are. And those moments are what makes the spec squishy, okay? So you're in a danger, like you're taking maybe 1 million damage per second, then all of a sudden you take 10 million damage per second, and you die. This happens all the time as Blood DK. All the time, okay? Other tanks mitigate it, because they have spells that they can use to mitigate it, but Death Knight does not really have many of those options, other than just having high raw health and using something like Icebound here and there. So those are the times when Bone Blood Shield was very powerful, and those are the times that are now nerfed, right? And everybody, you know, it's not really everybody, it's just Blizzard saying this won't matter while you're actively tanking. Of course it matters. There's so many times where you're not taking enough damage, you start building up Blood Shield for the big time, like especially with Dancing Rune Weapon up, right? You might not even be taking damage, so you're building the Dancing Rune Weapon's parry on top of the blood shield, so then as soon as Dancing Rune Weapon's open, you're not getting one shot. You know what I mean? That's how it works. And then you're just in those windows of feast and famine, and the best players are able to stay inside the window the whole time by managing CDs well, and the mediocre players like myself and others, we are just reacting. We're just hoping that we do it well enough to survive, and hoping we get lucky enough with parries, and you know, other CDs are, and that's why I layer my CDs the way I do, and that's why I take talents that give me more beneficial. I could make mistakes and still succeed because I'm just not mechanically that good, and obviously I'm reading chat half the time I'm playing anyway. Anyway, that's it. My rant over. Let me know what you guys think. I don't know anything about other tanks. People are saying like Brew got buffed and all that. Is it the same way? Did Brew get buffed in the way that Death Knight got nerfed? It doesn't sound like it, actually. It sounds like Brew is in a much better state, like mechanically. Like philosophically, they sound like they're better. But hey, we got tricked by Blizzard in the first place. Let me know what you guys think. Sky's not falling. Stop talking about quitting the game. If anybody posts that, I'm just letting you know I have no respect for you. If you quit a fucking video game after it being out for 20 years because of one like class change that you don't even have any experience playing, just you're just lying. I mean, you're gonna be back, right? Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.